created a space for you guys to upload your file. So let's go ahead and take a look at one of the issues that I've been having, which people found that they had to put, have their file as Shakespeare.txt and then .text. And the reason is because of just the way it was being saved on their computer. So one thing that since you're in CIS, you might want to do now is let's go ahead and go to your, if you're operating on Windows, you might want to go into let's see, View, Options. All right, and then one thing you might want to do over here is go into the View, and then uncheck the Hide Extensions for known file types. That way you'll be able to. And this is very useful because you want to be able to see what kind of files you're dealing with. So this will without it, basically it allows you to see the full extension for the file, including the .txt. So just uncheck that, and that will be and you'll be able to see stuff if they have a file type. All right. So now that we've got file reading done, let's do some basic. Let's go and use the last time to see how we can do something basic so how do I print out the entire text, right? Because here I was just doing. We could totally do that by just doing this and just, copy pasting forever. Right, but that's just not fun, really. Okay, so instead we need to do let's take a look at the functions we have in Reader. Reader dot, so they've got close to close the scanner, equals find all in line. Oh, this looks promising. Has next returns true if the scanner has another token in the input. Let's see what else they have. Oh, has next line. That seems even more promising. So returns true if there's another line of text, another line of input in the scanner. So what we can use is we can use something like this. We can do while reader.hasNextLine. While there is this, and this you're going to see that this is actually fairly straightforward to do, right? Because it makes logical sense. While the reader has a line to read, string line is equal to reader.nextLine, right? So read that line, and then system.out.println, print the line. So while this reader has the next line, let's go ahead and print it out. And it's done. And there's a bunch of the copyright stuff, which is a lack of it, but here's also the, and remember, there's only so much space that I can hold, right? If you look at the file, the Shakespeare file itself, it is it's like a 5. If you download the entire work of Shakespeare, it's like 5 megabytes big, right? Shakespeare wrote a lot of stuff, right? So it's not surprising that his works are that takes up a long amount of space. So that's more than my console can hold. So we run it, boom. And so this reads every single line of text. So we can also, now that we have this, we can do something like counting the number of lines, like int num lines is equal to 0. While reader has a line to read the line, and then do num lines ++ to read the number of lines. And then add a system.out.println at the end, num lines, to print out how many lines of text we read. And by outputting it, and by not printing out anything, I made it run a bit quicker. So system.out.println, right? I commented it out. So now I print out just the number of lines. It says 147,000, which should match up with over here. Yeah, it was off by 1, I think. Yeah, 929. It was off by 1. That happens sometimes. Just because that last line over here doesn't really have anything in there. But to say that it's an empty character, but whatever. That's getting to here now. But we can now see that's how many lines of text we have. Okay. Now, basically, let's say, what if I want to print out just the first word of every single line in here? Okay? So that seems like a bit more of a challenge. What if we just want to print out the first word of every single line? So let's go ahead and search for something. So let's use the index of function. So we're going to assume that our first word ends with a space, right? So what we'll do is that basically, this will be a pretty silly function. So let's see, we just want the first word. So like this, most, whatsoever, of, right? So let's see, int end of first word. That's going to be equal to line dot index of, and we're going to look for a space, essentially. Now, the way this will work is that, so I'm going to do something over here. If -1, so if end of first word equals -1, continue. Wait, what? Okay, that's fine. System.out.println line dot substring 0 to end of first word. Let's go through this, and then we're going to go through this, and then we'll figure out what the heck's going on, right? So run it. So that seems to be working. We've got but shall A be theirs keeps fresh to and go light, right? So a bunch of gibberish now, but basically we've got the first word of each line now. So what did I do here? So index of, that produces the first index which that string occurs in. So basically it's looking for the index at which the first string occurs. So the first space. So here in this line, we consider each line to be its own string, right? So here the first space was at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we were looking for index 4 here. Okay, so it returned index 4. And so then I said, okay, I'd like to print out the substring 0 to index 4, which meant that I'll go up to 0, 1, 2, 3, but not include the 4 right over there. Right? And now you see why it's why you want it exclusive a lot of the time. Because a lot of times you don't want to include the thing you just found. Okay, but what was this whole business of this end of first word is equal to -1, continue? Well, this has to do with the fact that basically not every line had a space in it, right? This line doesn't have a space in it. It's just a new line over there. This line doesn't have a space in it. That is a new line over there. So if I don't, as basically for any line that doesn't have a new line in it, it's going to crash. Sorry, that doesn't have a space in it. It's going to crash because it's going to say, you can't start a string at 0 and go to -1. Wait, where's that -1 coming from, though? Well, the -1 comes from, well, suppose that a line doesn't have a space in it. How do I return that to the user, right? Well, the answer is that, well, the valid indices start at 0, right, and they go up to the size of the string, right? So what we'll do in Java is that we say that if you can't find it at an index, right, if the index doesn't exist, we'll just return -1 since that index doesn't exist, right? So -1 means we didn't find it. So what does this line over here? End of first word equals next line. End of first word is equal to -1, continue. Well, all this says is that basically if I couldn't find the end of the first word, execute this continue statement, which is a statement we haven't seen yet. I also haven't taught you break yet, but that's fine. Continue is basically what it says is that I'm done with this current iteration of the loop. Let's go to the next iteration of the loop. I'm done. Let's go to the next iteration of the loop. So, for instance, if I were to print something that had a continue statement, if I did something like this, for int I is equal to 0, I is less than or equal to 10, I plus plus. if I mod 0, sorry, if I mod 2 equals 0, continue system.out.println I, this would skip all the numbers that were divisible by 2, all the even numbers. Continue would just say, okay, go to the next one. Okay, so it's useful. I mean, but of course, we could also just do this with an if statement, with a blank if statement like this. We could just simply do it like this, right? The continue isn't like one of those necessary features. Like, I've been hard pressed to find a place where it's actually necessary, but it makes your code a bit cleaner, because we could totally do this. If the end of the first word is equal to, if basically that space doesn't exist, don't do anything. Otherwise, we print the appropriate substring, right? So we don't necessarily need the continue, but it sure made our code look a bit cleaner, right? So that's pretty cool. So we can read so we've learned how we can read files, and it doesn't actually take too much. So why am I doing a while loop over here as opposed to a for loop? Well, it's because when I'm opening a file, I have no freaking clue how big it's going to be. I don't know how many lines there are. I mean, maybe I could count that out. I can do some counting or something, but that seems like it's a hard problem. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to simply read. While there's stuff to read, I'm going to keep reading it, right? While there's stuff to read, I read it. Okay. And this has, as you can imagine, this has a lot of applications to do because, if we're processing a lot of data, it's not going to be when we process data, like if it's in a spreadsheet or something, it's not going to be read to you. You're not going to sit in and input them like the first entry is 10, then it's 12, then it's 14. No, wait, it was 13. Great, I need to start again, right? You're not going to do that. Instead, you're going to do you're going to want to operate with a file, right? Something that's already there, so you can try running it, and then, oh, that didn't work. Maybe I need to make a few changes to my program and run it again, right? So we will go into more detail in this and how this works. I don't think I'll be able to make a video for this, but right now we're just going to look how we can read files. Writing files is a different thing altogether. That's a bit harder because, of course, when you write stuff to your computer, well, think about what we can do. Essentially, just think about what you can do maliciously, right? Once you can write stuff to a computer, you could write as much as you wanted to somebody's computer and, just fill up their hard disk space. Reading stuff isn't so bad unless you reading something causes something to crash. But right now, there's a limited amount of damage we can do. Writing stuff means we could totally cause some damage, but not really too much because you could just delete a file once your program crashes. But what we'll do is that we'll look at how do we read some files, especially some things that are called CSV files, which stands for comma-separated values, which are essentially the precursor to what you would deal with in Excel. In fact, Excel imports a lot of those CSV files for you. But for right now, we'll see what we can do. We'll see the limitations of what we can do. And then we'll build up to a couple of interesting programs with this. What I'd like to do is, my hope is that I'm going to write, whereas that in lab we'll do something called a speed reader. Basically something that you can read a bunch of text at a really high rate of words per minute. And then the other one is showing that basically random numbers aren't nearly as uniformly distributed as normal. So maybe we'll do stuff like validating election results and also testing to see basically, detecting fraud. Let's give you the tools you would need to detect numerical fraud and that kind of stuff. All right, so that's my lecture for the day. I'm going to upload it as 2 separate videos. Okay.